Latest release of CInema4D, that's r25, Maxon have redesigned the viewport. So when you open it, it'll look something like this. And it looks very different from the more familiar one if you've been using previous versions, which is this, with the familiar icons at the top to do with navigation and model making. But let's go back to the new viewport here. It's darker, and the main central viewport window is larger, and that's one of the reasons for this change, to make a more efficient use of your desk space. But if you want to get used to the new icons and then get used to the viewport design, there is a way to get back to the old placement, and that is by clicking the toggle switch on the right hand corner of the screen there, new layouts, and then selecting standard here. Okay, so the layout there is more familiar. You've got your icons along the top, and then your more advanced model making icons down the side. They do look a bit different, but they are kind of familiar because they look similar to the old ones. For example, you get your render icons as those clapperboard ones there. You get your primitives there, so click and hold, you get your series of primitives. We'll select a cube, and you get your navigation tools there. But the basic layout was this, in that when you had a cube and you selected it in the Objects Manager here, then its attributes or properties would appear in the box below. And this window here was for the materials. Now if we go back to the new layout, so we'll click on New Layouts there, and we'll select Standard again. Okay, so our cube I've just created is still there, so it's listed in this Objects Manager, which hasn't changed, and its attributes are below here, and that hasn't changed too. There isn't any space here for the materials, and we'll come to that in a sec. Okay, so the icons have been shifted around, so your model making icons are now down the right hand side of the viewport, and the reason for that is that they are now next to the Objects Manager, so there isn't so much clicking and dragging of objects from other places of the screen. So your primitive cube, for example, is right next to the Objects Manager in which it'll be situated. And similarly with subdivision surfaces and all those NURBS icons there, they are very close to the Objects Manager, so it makes for a more efficient way of working. Okay, and we move over to the other areas. So at the top here you get your more advanced model making tools. You have your points, edges and polygons there, for example, and down here you have your navigation tools and various other tools that are content of the viewport specific, so these will change. But you have your move tool, for example. You have your rotation tool, which is next to your move tool, so that's a change because the scale tool used to be in the middle, but you use those far more than you do the scale, or at least I do. And then you have your selection tool up there. Okay, so how do we find those other familiar areas? Right, well, so the first thing then is materials. So materials are no longer underneath the viewport, they're to the right hand side, and you access it by clicking a corner icon there, and there are 4 corners and 4 important corner icons. So the materials one is there, and you have your space in which to create your materials here. So if I go create materials, new standard material, for example, you get your familiar material icon there that you can double click and you get your materials editor up in a normal way. Okay, and this is handy too, because instead of having to drag the icon from down here, for example, you can now drag it from almost where the object is. Okay, I'll just make them so you can see the actual change. Just make them a little bit of a visible color. Okay, so they're right next to it. So it's for a quicker and more efficient workflow. And then when you want to hide that material section, you just click that again. Okay, some more changes then. Again, one of these corner icons, the content browser is accessed through the top left corner icon. Now, this was kind of problematic in previous versions because you would have to download the content browser, which could be sort of 7 or 8 gigabytes worth of stuff, when you installed your software. And much of that you would never use, so it would take up a lot of disk space and a lot of time downloading stuff that you wouldn't use. But now you can view all the content of the content browser without actually having to download it, and then download what you need when you want to. For example, if I want to download that plant there, I could just double click it, it would download the asset, and then it would appear as an object in the Objects Manager. So again, far more efficient. Okay, in the bottom left hand side of the screen we have the timeline, and the bottom right is your coordinates manager that used to be underneath the screen too. So those are the major changes that I found. You know, it doesn't, on the face of it, it's a lot of getting used to, but if you break down the changes themselves and spend a little bit of time getting used to them, it's not such a big deal, and I think it will be really helpful in the long run when you are used to them. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.